Hey, Ironman. We're glad you're here with us again this week, and others who are joining us who aren't Ironmen. Thankful to have you tuned in and watching us as we go through our book on Soul Detox. Today we're going to be looking at the Toxin of Self-Deception, the lies that we tell ourselves, good and bad, or not necessarily good, but there are different types of lies that we're going to be looking at as far as how we deceive ourselves. The verse in Jeremiah says, Jeremiah 17, the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? Naturally, we are deceivers. We are a fallen species. From the Garden of Eden, Satan deceived us, and we have been sinful ever since then. So there's an expression that says we don't know what we don't know about ourselves. If you think about that for a second, we don't know what we don't know. And it means, generally speaking, that we need to take a close look at ourselves and try to understand what are our weak spots and what are our blind spots when it comes to sinful things that are going on in our lives. So why can't we see our own self-generated toxins? David answers this question in Psalm 36, verse 2 and 3. I'm going to read this. It says, in their own eyes they flatter themselves too much to detect or hate their sin. The words of their mouths are wicked and deceitful, and they fail to act wisely or to do good. We become so skilled at self-deception that we can't even, number one, we can't identify when we're lying to ourselves, and so we can't detect it. And if we can't detect it, then we can't confess it. We have to understand where our sins are. All of us, ones that aren't, self-introspective or going through life without even stopping and thinking, what can I do better? Where are some spots in my life that I am sinning? And ask God to show us where those are. And once we get to that point, then we can confess as well. You probably know somebody like I do. I know more than one person like this who thinks of themselves more highly than they ought to. They think of themselves better than they ought to. But we like to point fingers at those kind of people, but it's hard for us all to be objective about ourselves, whether it's our singing ability, our athletic ability. I've played tennis before against guys that thought they were pretty good, and I went out there and I killed them. And on the converse, I played tennis one time, I remember, with a professor from college, and I thought I was a hot shot. I'd just come back from playing college tennis in East Tennessee, came back and was taking a summer school class in Mississippi, was telling my professor about how good I was, went out there, and he beat me 6-0, 6-0. So we got to really take a close look at ourselves and be objective. But we have this unlimited capacity for deceiving ourselves. I truly believe that. And we lie to ourselves all the time about that we're okay, that we're fine. We don't really need to work on certain things. Have you ever gone to karaoke and listened to somebody sing who thought they were a really good singer? And then they're up there singing and you think, doesn't that person have any friends who would maybe tell them, that song's probably not in your vocal range, or that's maybe not the best thing you should go do tonight. Maybe sit back here and have a drink and just laugh and enjoy yourselves. But I went to a friend of mine's 50th birthday party not far from here, and they did karaoke that night. And there was a guy who got up and sang The Gambler by Kenny Rogers. Probably not his best choice of song, but it was a fun crowd, and everybody was having a good time and encouraging the singers and trying to jump in when they could. But this guy was so bad that the crowd turned on him and started heckling him. And they weren't booing him, but they were laughing and sort of making fun of him. And it got so bad, he turned his back to the audience just where he was only looking at the screen because he was embarrassed. And the whole time we're thinking, gosh, just somebody should have told him, don't do it. You're not as good as you think you are. But chances are you don't believe something is untrue, even if it is. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been deceived in the first place. We need to identify the lies and we need to replace them with truth. It's like the alcoholic who swears he doesn't have a problem, and everybody around him can speak truth in his life, but until he admits it on his own, he's going to continue to leave a wake of destruction in his path and not understand at all that the problem is with him. I heard a joke this morning about a guy who had 5 wives, and he went to the pastor and he says, "Pastor, I need you to pray for me." He said, "Because I'm about to get married again." And the pastor said to him, he said, "I need you to pray for him because all of my wives have been cheating on me, every one of them." And he said to the guy, he says, "Well, the only common denominator in all 5 of those marriages is you. Maybe the problem does in fact lie with you." So one of the things that we need to do as far as examining ourselves is, there's different tests out there you can do, and you're trying to figure out what kind of personality you have, like the Enneagram test or the Strength Finder test or whatever it is. So for me, I've been trying to figure out, okay, what are some areas that I need to work on? So I went through this Enneagram test and I figured out what my number was. I was a number 7. And one of the negatives, or an unhealthy 7, is that you will start projects. You start with excitement, but you don't finish. You don't have a lot of follow through. And I realized, that's one of my weak points. I don't follow through on things as well as I should be. And that's just an example of ways that we can try to better ourselves. We need to have this internal examination, especially when it comes to looking for toxins that are in our lives. Anything that you do that cripples your spiritual effectiveness is a toxin. And it's something that's distracting you from the main goal that God has for you in your life. So we need to look at these things like toxic emotions, any deep feelings that keep you from God's truth. We need to take an honest look at the things that we're consuming, and this is what we talked about last week. What kind of movies are you watching? What kind of media are you watching? What type of television shows? What type of internet are you looking at? The sites that you surf, the people that you are hanging around can be toxic to your life. And the first step to defeating the enemy is recognizing the enemy. We need to pray that God is going to show us and open our eyes to an enemy that we can't see. It's an invisible enemy that's going to help show us what the toxins are in our life. When I was in college, I was playing tennis. As I mentioned earlier, early in the season, I had a doubles partner who was totally negative, one of the most negative people you'd ever seen. But he was also hilarious, and he was so funny that I loved hanging around with him because he made me laugh. But he was super negative, and I had 2 sisters that both knew him, and they both said, "I can't believe you like hanging around with that guy. He's the most negative person I've ever met." And I said, he just makes me laugh. I like being around him because I think he's funny. Well, before long, his negativity started wearing off on me, and then I started arguing calls from our opponents. I started throwing my racket like he was throwing his racket, and his behavior totally, bled into mine, and it really he was really a bad influence on me. I'm still friends with the guy today. I still think he's funny, but he hasn't changed much. He's still about the same. But as we're doing these introspective type evaluations of ourselves, we need to ask ourselves some important questions, or we need to be careful about things that we say. And if you start uttering these kind of phrases, you need to be careful. And the first one is, "I don't have a problem with this." Okay, the second one is, "It's really no big deal. This is the way I just cope with everything." "I'm not as bad as most people." That's a terrible one. That's the one where we compare ourselves, we set the bar super low when we really should be comparing ourselves to the bar set by Christ. The next one is, "I can quit anytime I want to." Okay? You've been told you've got a problem with overeating. You've got a problem with being lazy. You've got a problem with playing video games too much. You have a problem with being on your phone all the time, looking at social media, scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Okay, you've been told that that's a problem, but you're like, "Nah, I can quit anytime I want to. It's not a big deal." And the last one is, you just say, "This is just the way I am. I can't change. This is how things are." And it's been said that the more convinced you are that you're right, the more likely you are that you're wrong. If someone who loves you tries to show you that there's a dangerous pattern in your life, if it's somebody that you truly trust, and you're 100% convinced that they're wrong, then the chances are they're 100% right. If you're 100%, there's no doubt at all that you're wrong. If it's somebody you truly trust, you need to listen to them. Peter in the New Testament is a great example of this. In Matthew 26:33, Peter replied, "Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will." Okay, this is when Jesus says, "Hey, all of you guys are going to deny me. And then he says, no, Peter, before the rooster crows 3 times, you're going to deny me. No. I would never do that. 3 different times, Peter denied him. If someone has been trying to show you something, okay, about yourself, and you continue to fight it, it might be time to admit that that's a lie in your life, that you're being deceived. Someone might have told you that, like we said, that you're addicted to a certain behavior, a certain thing, and you might not think that it's a big deal, but maybe if it's coming between you and your relationships, it is a big deal. If it's coming between you and your time that you're spending with your kids or time that you're spending with God, then it's a big deal. And don't flatter yourself so much that you can't detect or hate your own sins. Okay, we have to detect it before we can confess it. And we need outside help to be aware of our blind spots. Last week we joked about asking our wives, hey, what do I need to improve on? Yeah, I'm like you, I don't want to do that. But the truth is, we do need to talk to somebody close to us and go, okay, what do you think that I need to work on? Okay, what's something that you see that I could be better at? The other day we were having coffee with some friends of mine, and this one guy was kind of going around the room and describing people, and he got to me and he said, yeah, he's the happy one. He said, Kyle, you're the grumpy one in the group. And I'm like, hey, come on. And then I started thinking about, sometimes I can be kind of grumpy. Sometimes I like playing the role of the grumpy guy in the group. So it's not anything really to laugh about. It's something I need to work on. But sometimes I want to change. Just like that. And in order to do that, we have to ask God to show us what's true about our lives and how we should be thinking, how we should be talking. And that answer might just come from a friend. Okay, God speaks to us through other people. And don't ever forget that that's one of his ways of communicating. Besides talking to us through prayer, through quiet time, and through our scripture, oftentimes he communicates truth through close friends. Proverbs 15, 31 through 32 says this, it's on the screen. Whoever heeds life-giving correction will be at home among the wise. Those who disregard discipline despise themselves. There's this expression that I'm not a big fan of, and it's called a life-giving rebuke. Okay, you guys ever had a life-giving rebuke given to you? I don't like the word rebuke is being sent in my direction. A rebuke seems really harsh. That means something you've done was really bad and I'm going to call you out on it. But occasionally God will send somebody to communicate a strong and important message through a life-giving rebuke. But it's important to note that not all rebukes are life-giving. Some rebukes are life-taking rebukes, especially if it's coming from someone that you don't respect or you don't like. So make sure that when you are the one giving the life rebuke, or you're talking to somebody that you're concerned about their behavior or whatever the case may be, make sure you've got a good enough relationship with them that you've earned the right to do that you've earned the right to rebuke them and point out maybe one of their blind spots. All right, so we need to listen. You need to listen to what your loved ones have been trying to tell you. If more than one person has been telling you that you have a problem with something in your character, chances are pretty good that you have a problem, if it's more than one person. And be listening for something. Maybe God's been kind of telling you that there's a change, and then all of a sudden you pick it up from somebody else, and then somebody else mentions something to you about it, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, yeah, maybe this is something I need to work on. John 1:8 says, if we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. We can't claim that we don't have problems. We can't claim that we don't have sins, and we can't claim that we don't have blind spots. All of us have sinned, okay? And this is what John 1:8 is talking about. If we claim to be without sin, all you're doing is lying to yourself. When God reveals spiritual toxins that need to be cleansed, I hope that you and I hope that I will have the courage to act swiftly and decisively to do something about it. James 1:22 says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. You have to do what it says. Okay, don't just hear it, do something about it. When you hear somebody that's talking to you about change that needs to take place, and you know down in your heart that's probably a God message, then you need to do something about it. But in conclusion, I want to finish with this. Okay, you can't change what you don't see. Okay, if you don't know that that you're having problems with something, it's time to see the truth. And you might be tempted to say, but I'm not a bad person. I'm a good person. And you may be a good person, but we're all still sinful, and we all still have these toxins in our lives. So I would say, yes, you'd say, I'm not a bad person. I would probably say to you, yes, you are a bad person. And yes, I am a bad person too. Okay, remember how I talked about how Christians are harder on ourselves than anybody else, okay? But we have a standard that we're trying to meet. We have a bar that we're trying to reach. We're trying to be holy as Jesus is holy. All right, remember, you can't change what you don't see. People need to point out things to you. You need to do some self-examination about what needs to change in your life. It's time to see the truth, but oftentimes people will argue, they'll say, but I'm not a bad person. And I would say to you, yes, you are a bad person, and so am I. I'm also a bad person. We're selfish. Jeremiah 17, remember, says the heart is deceitful above all things. The Bible tells us that the only way and the only person who's good is Jesus. And that's the only way that we can remove, and he's the only remedy for the toxins that have come into our soul. I hope this was a great lesson for you. I hope this is something that you can use this week, and we'll see you next week.